Peace, love and life family. It's your girl, Morgan Renee Myers, tuning in with y'all for another reading. Story time with More of Mine. Recapturing the African Mind by Brother Bruce Bridges. Real quick, let me cut up some of this lime to put in my water. I've been taking some teaspoons of elderberry, but I still kind of got a little phlegm, a little cough, a little mucus in me. I have been eating some potatoes and like fries and stuff. And I know that can definitely cause some mucus, so time to go on another cleanse, and one of the things that I'm finding, because I've been doing different vegan challenges and juice and smoothie cleanses and all kind of stuff. What I'm learning with all of this is about balance. And even people, they be like, well, if you vegan, why you always detoxing and fasting and da-da-da-da-da? Because whether you eating foods from the earth or not, you got so many toxins in your daily environment. The household products that you use, the gas and the oil and the fumes and stuff, stuff that's in the air, chemtrails. So it's always something to detox from. And then, even like with our water, like the tap water is terrible. So I buy water out the store, but I still shower in tap water. So, the water that's just coming out the faucet. So you're always going to need to be detoxing and cleansing. And so it's cool to see the transition from when I just wasn't very mindful of how I was eating at all to my transition of my mindset after I've done some of these cleanses and challenges. It's like, okay, if I know I haven't had the best week of what I've been consuming, then I know I could take some days to fast or get some juicing in, or, herbs, teas. I still got to create a better relationship with herbs and teas and stuff, but nonetheless, let's hop back into the book. Peace, Brother Jonathan. Peace, Sister Kay. How are y'all doing today? Jesus. All right. So we're in chapter 3. It was pretty lengthy, so I stopped at a certain part, and it's entitled "The Manufacturing of Slaves in America." So we discussed a lot yesterday. I'm not going to even do a recap. I'm just going to go right into the next half. So horse training methods applied to enslaved Africans. Hold on, y'all. Let me move this cup of water so that I don't spill it on my laptop. Gotta clean my desk off. Crochet stuff everywhere, honey. Oh, okay. So horse training methods. An examination of horse training methods is necessary to fully appreciate the training techniques applied to enslaved Africans. A dam or mother horse is essential for the horse training process, while the stallion or father horse is not involved at all. Oh, that's why men love comparing themselves to animals in nature when they don't stick around and be proactive in their children's lives. Well, nature, we got a bunch of sperm and we can get y'all pregnant. Y'all can only be pregnant with one man child at a time. So y'all ain't supposed to be, but we can. That's another topic for another day. A dam or mother horse is essential for the horse training process, while the stallion or father horse is not involved at all. In nature, it is the stallion's responsibility to lead, protect, and provide food and shelter for his herd. Upon capture, however, the stallion is first broken by the use of the whip. Afterwards, a bit is placed in his mouth to control his movements. Some stallions never make the adjustment to the saddle and bit. Those are usually castrated, and a castrated stallion is called a gelding, which is highly prized for his brute strength and gentle nature. Oh, wow. Yeah, because they don't have I don't know if it's called testosterone in animals too, but yeah, because they lose their ability to be able to do that. Yeah, okay. Essentially, man becomes the stallion to the mother horse, who plays the most important role in the offspring's development. The taming of the dam is of the utmost importance to the future of training the foal. A newborn horse or foal is able to stand almost immediately following birth. This ability allows the foal to suckle nourishment from his long-legged mother. A foal never willingly leaves the side of the dam. When the foal is removed from the dam, she reacts violently, and it is best to leave foal and dam together. The foal remains with its mother throughout the developing stages of life. First, as a yearling at more than one, but less than 2 years of age. After the yearling stage, a female more than 4 years old is called a mare, and a male of the same age is called a colt. In nature, a dam, or the mother horse, can bear a foal every 3 to 4 years. It is then and only then that she will drive off the yearling horse as she prepares for the birth of her new foal. Realizing the strong ties between the dam and the foal helped humans in the training of the foal in a manner that did not make the dam feel threatened. The initial stage in training is that of the nursery school, which takes the horse from birth to about 3 years. The foal is placed in halters shortly after birth. As a yearling, he is introduced to the weight of the saddle on his back. This is followed by a period of primary education, which may last for no more than 6 months, after which the horse is given a rest and allowed time to grow naturally. The growth is encouraged by good feeding. Colts or mares are then gradually introduced to the bridle, bit, and reins. By the age of 4, the secondary stage is begun, which consists of being saddle-ridden and controlled by the use of the bridle, bit, and reins. Although still far from being mature, most horses will be sufficiently developed and strong enough to be given somewhat more demanding exercises. For most horses, the formal education stops here, but for those who are destined for specific jobs, the education becomes more specialized. With no additional training, however, all horses at this stage are expected to be obedient and easy to ride. Horses train well using a system of reward and punishment. Much of the nursery stage is concerned with the foal learning by association with his dam and by copying her. Certainly only minimal demands are made of the horses during this stage, and none which call for physical effort on their part. The immediate objectives, beyond the natural development of the foal, are concerned with forming a relationship between the trainer and the animal. Once the fowl's confidence has been won, an element of discipline must be introduced, which enables the very first simple lessons in obedience to be taught. This will involve the fowl accepting the presence of humans and becoming accustomed to being handled by them. In both of these instances, the fowl will follow the example of the dam, and if she submits easily to handling, there should be no difficulty in his following her example. Subjugation can never be total, nor should it be, for then there will be the danger of breaking the horse's spirit and reducing him to dull, mindless automation. So, from training horses to training Africans. The techniques for training enslaved Africans were adapted to resemble those used to train horses due to the lifespan and stages of development of the horse. Except for cattle, most domesticated animals mature too quickly and are weaned from their mothers at an earlier age of physical development. The dam exerts a greater influence over the fowl for a longer period of time, similar to a human mother. When it is important to the white man economically, he will study the habits of the black man in order to exploit him. The white man first observed the relationship between mother and child in Africa. In Africa, women space their children to devote time to nurturing and physical development. To strengthen the bond between her baby and herself, the mother carried the baby strapped to her back every waking moment. At night, the baby slept in the mother's arms and nursed at her breast until she was nearly 2 years old. The mother was the center of the child's universe, and he had only limited contact with the father and siblings. The mother was the child's first teacher and mentor, and the child followed her example willingly. At about 10 or 12, the female continued to be mentored by her mother and the women of the village. The male, however, was taken from his mother and her influences and initiated through the rites of passage into manhood. Lessons were taught by his father and the wise men of the village. After going through the rites of passage, the male child was no longer permitted to spend time with the women, but instead was continuously trained in his role as a man. His courage was tested for leadership. He fought in mock battles to develop his courage and character. He learned to depend upon his comrades to develop responsibility to the group. Only after he completed the rites of passage was he permitted to marry and father children. He earned the right to be called a man and was respected as such. The intent of the system of slavery was to rob the African man of his responsibilities of manhood and emotionally castrate him. Similar to the gelded horse, men who succumbed to the mentality, and the gelded horse was the horse that they castrated. If he wouldn't assimilate, they would castrate the horse, and then they will become more gentle and subservient. Similar to the gelded horse, men who succumb to the mentally devastating process form no threatening thoughts against their masters. Part of the process for manufacturing slaves was to eliminate the traditional mentoring relationships between fathers and sons and other young males in the community. The deprivation of this fundamental rite of passage resulted in black males being confused about their loyalty to the group and to black women. The cycle that was put into motion during slavery persists today as young black males continue to suffer from a lack of mentoring from their fathers and other males in the community. As these young males transition to manhood without the benefit of this guidance, they remain physically present but emotionally removed from the lives of their female counterparts and their children. There's a language in the training process of the horse, and there's a language in the training process of the slave. Africans were not regarded as human beings. They were, therefore, rarely referred to in human or Christian terms. Rather, the following derogatory terms were commonly used to describe Africans. Buck, a term used contemptuously or patronizingly to describe a young African or Indian male. Wench, a term associated with prostitutes or loose women. Pickaninny, a term from the Spanish word pequeño, meaning little, a patronizing or contemptuous term used to describe an African baby or child. Nigger, a term used to refer to black persons. Negro, a term used to describe a person of African descent south of the Sahara. It is clear from the above list that none of the negative terms derive from Africa. Nonetheless, in less than one generation of enslavement, blacks have been indoctrinated to refer to themselves by these and other derogatory terms. Moreover, to this day, African people still relish the use of derogatory terms when they speak about or to Africans. They still refer to another as niggers. Young black men who lack the training of older men refer to black women as bitches and whores. They father children whom they neither have the will nor the inclination to properly care for. They affectionately call one another dog and often call their sons little dog or little bow wow. Don't nobody call their sons little dog or little bow wows. They might say that's my dog, but don't nobody call their son little bow wow. That's all bow wow. That's all Shad Moss. He came up with that rap name. That's on him. This is Recapturing the African Mind by Bruce Bridges, Mama Nia. I got it from a cultural market we had at Bethel AME one year, like about 3 years ago. And him and the guy from the Last Poets was there, and Baba Bruce was vending these books, and he signed it for me and everything. To Morgan, Always Seek Knowledge, on April 2nd, 2016. And he left me his number in case you want to order copies and things like that. I might need to have a sit down with this brother after I get done with this book and interview him. That would be great. Okay. Little bow wow. Slave mothers were held in very high esteem by their children. Frequently, small children fought overseers who were whipping their mothers. Even when they had an opportunity to escape from bondage, many slaves refused to leave their mothers. It was the slave mother who most often flew into a rage at white punishment of her child and defied authority. And when she fled slavery, she took her children with her. Slave mothers were often allowed infractions, which were denied men for this reason. Slave mothers who had their children sold away might kill themselves or burn the plantation. Except for skilled artisan work, slave mothers provided the training for their children. This training included field work, cooking, sewing, child care, quilting, and many other plantation jobs. Under the mentoring of their mothers, slave children learned their plantation duties and responsibilities. They also followed her examples of sometimes fame, loyalty, and respect for whites. Lessons the children learned willingly because they observed their mother working willingly. Slave children, like fowls, were divided according to age and trained accordingly. Until the slave child reached the age of about 6, he was allowed to perform only light chores such as gathering firewood and caring for the younger siblings. The children were often fed like pigs from a single trough where they ate with their hands. Generally, older slave women had responsibility for slave children while their mothers were working in the fields. At the end of the day, on the way home, mothers stopped by the nursery to retrieve their children. Like the horse, slave children were given names related to their growth and workability. Quarter hand, child of 6 or older who does light yard work, is taught to pull weeds in the field. Half hand, child of at least 8 years of age, works half day, is taught to perform gradually more physically taxing tasks. Full hand, a child nearly 15 years of age who works alongside parents for the full work day. Yep, you was an adult by the time you're 15. It would be. Please type it in here for me, little sis. I am on the run. Mama Nia, it's actually the title of this live. So once you end it, you should be able to see the title of my live. Because girl, I'm probably gonna forget to type it as soon as I get off this thing. I gotta finish some orders. But I'll share it in your inbox if I remember. Okay. Moreover, it is no mistake that the use of the term hand to record the slave's physical growth was the same term used by whites to measure the horse's height. The deliberate use of animal terms rather than human terms to describe slaves was simply another tool of exploitation and submission. Throughout the training process, slave mothers, not the master or the overseer, trained their children. If the child was a poor worker, the mother was faulted. If the child was productive, the mother was rewarded. This was the same system of reward and punishment used to train the horses. The trainer and the master abolished the natural instincts of the horse and the African in order to use them for their own purpose. To train the horse, the trainer assumed the role of the lead stallion, thereby corrupting the horse's dominant herd instinct learned through the teachings of the horse's mother. This same technique was used on the enslaved Africans. By corrupting the mind of the mother and eliminating or substantially reducing the role of the father, the master and trainer was able to use the enslaved mother to continue the cycle of corruption with future generations. With the disruption in the critical mentoring process from their elders, enslaved African men lacked the skills and understanding necessary to trust other Africans. Instead, they shied away from the company of their herd or their African brothers. Black Beauty in illustration. In the European classic tale of Black Beauty, the life of the horse, as it is very interestingly told by the author Anna Sewell, very closely parallels the life of the African slave. Sewell published her book in 1877, shortly after the abolition of slavery in America. Although she focused on making people aware of the suffering of horses, in doing so, she accurately described the life of African slaves. For instance, in one passage in the book, the mother of Black Beauty says of the other colts, "These colts are very good, but they have not learned good manners. You have been well bred and well born, and I will hope you grow up to be gentle and good. Do your work willingly." The mother of Black Beauty was well trained by the master due to the absence of the male horse or the stallion, and she, in turn, trained the colt, Black Beauty, to do the will of the master. In the chapter of Black Beauty called My Breaking In, Black Beauty explains the process of breaking in and says it means to teach a horse to wear a saddle and a bridle and to carry a man, woman, or child on your back and to go just the way they wish and to go quietly. Black Beauty learned well the teachings of his mother, so it was not difficult to break him. Breaking and training horses closely resemble the schooling of human slave child, both of which are necessary if they are to be of service to their masters. Horse handlers use saddles and bridles with their various component parts, stirrups, girths, and the like, which have become so much a part of riding life that most people seldom give them a thought. In the same way that stirrups, girths, and harnesses have become so closely associated with horseback riding, force, fear, and fraud, which were tools used to control Africans, likewise have become so much a part of the slave indoctrination that they are seldom given a thought. When time came for iron shoes to be fitted on Black Beauty along with a collar and blinkers, he wanted to kick out in protest, but he could not, as he says, kick such a good master. Many slaves on the plantation, especially house slaves, referred to their masters as good. They referred to them this way because they ate good in relation to the other slaves, dressed in discarded clothes of the master, lived in the house, and was so close to him. In the history by Anna Sewell, beauty is sold from one owner to another, just as slaves were sold from plantation to plantation. There was a discussion in a place called Birtwick Park between Black Beauty and a horse called Merrylegs. The discussion was about a horse named Ginger who was very high-spirited and stood up for herself. Merrylegs could not understand the strong, free spirit of Ginger and made the following statement: "I could understand if she were being treated badly here, but there is not a better place for a horse in the whole country than this. John is the best groom that ever was, and James the stable boy treats all the horses well. It is Ginger's own fault that she was moved out of that box." African Americans often say there's no better place for us than America. Some have said this white man is not bad at all. The insane populace of black Americans see other African Americans who stand for something as being at fault, as opposed to slave masters being at fault. African Americans are clearly out of their minds, as was Mary Legs in the story of Black Beauty. All right, I'm going to keep going. So this next part of the chapter is entitled The Willie Lynch Method. Let me read this. A helicopter herded wild horses near Ontario, Oregon. The horses followed a trained horse into a small corral where they were held pending adoption. Like the horse picture above, an African/African American was often trained to lead the masses or herd to their destruction. You can't really see the picture that good. I think that's the helicopter, and these are the horses being led. So the Willie Lynch method. In the West Indies, where Willie Lynch's plantation was located, slavery was older than the practice in North America. Most of the observations about the manufacturing of a slave were the result of Lynch's experiences in the West Indies and his training of slave masters using those experiences. Lynch's message, entitled The Making of a Slave, is set forth below in its entirety. Gentlemen, I greet you here on the banks of the James River in the year of our Lord 1712. First, I shall thank you, the gentlemen of the colony of Virginia, for bringing me here. I am here to help you solve some of your problems with slaves. Your invitation reached me on my modest plantation in the West Indies, where I have experimented with some of the newest and oldest methods for control of slaves. Ancient Rome would envy us if my program is implemented. As our boat sailed south on the James River, named for our illustrious king, whose version of the Bible we cherish, I saw enough to know that your problem is not unique. While Rome used cords of wood as crosses for standing human bodies along its old highways in great numbers, you are here using the tree and the rope on occasion. I caught the whiff of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple of miles back. You are not only losing valuable stock by hangings, you are having uprisings. Slaves are running away. Your crops are sometimes left in the fields too long for maximum profit. You suffer occasional fires. Your animals are killed. Gentlemen, you know what your problems are. I do not need to elaborate. I am not here to enumerate your problems. However, I am here to introduce you to a method of solving them. In my bag here, I have a foolproof method for controlling your black slaves. I guarantee every one of you that if installed correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. My method is simple. Any member of your family or your overseer can use it. I've outlined a number of differences among the slaves, and I take these differences and make them bigger. I use fear, distrust, and envy for every purpose. These methods have worked on my modest plantation in the West Indies, and it will work throughout the South. Take this simple list of differences and think about them. On top of my list is age, but it is there only because it starts with an A. The second is color or shade. There is intelligence, size, sex, size plantation, status on plantation, attitude of owners, whether the slaves live in the valley, on the hill, east, west, north, south, have fine hair, coarse hair, or is tall or short. Now that you have a list of differences, I shall give you an outline of action. But before I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust and envy is stronger than adulation, respect, or admiration. The black slave, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry on and will become self-refueling and self-generating for hundreds of years, maybe thousands. Don't forget, you must pitch the old black male against the young black male and the young black male against the old black male. You must use the dark-skinned slaves against the light-skinned slaves and the light-skinned slaves against the dark-skinned slaves. You must use the female against the male and the male against the female. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all your blacks, but it is necessary that your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us. Gentlemen, these kits are your keys to control. Use them. Have your wives and children use them. Never miss an opportunity. If used intensely for 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful. Thank you, gentlemen. And this is Willie Lynch, 1712, from The Making of a Slave. This speech was intended to program blacks to be the way they are. The whole system was thoroughly planned. Lynch guaranteed that this method would control blacks for 300 years and perhaps 1,000 years. Methods of force, fear, and fraud. During the period of physical slavery of Africans in America, Richard Hildreth was born in Deerfield, Massachusetts, 1807 to 1865. Being the offspring of an outspoken minister, Hildreth hated any hint of restriction of expression in matters of religion. He wrote a pamphlet entitled Appeal to Common Sense and the Constitution on behalf of unlimited freedom of discussion. After graduating from Harvard University and teaching, let me highlight that so I could look it up. He wrote a pamphlet entitled Appeal to Common Sense and the Constitution on behalf of unlimited freedom of discussion. After graduating from Harvard University and teaching for 2 years, he left Boston for Florida in search of a more healthful climate for tuberculosis. While in Florida, Hildreth lived on a slave plantation, and while there, he developed an intense hatred for the slave system. He wrote 2 important books during his 18 months on the plantation. One, a novel, The Slave, or Memoirs of a Fugitive, and the other, Despotism in America, an analysis of the deleterious effects of slavery on the economic and political development of the southern states. So hold on, I'm going to repeat those book names. Pretty lengthy titles. Peace, Saladin. When you was on the subject yesterday, I was about to comment a quote from the Willie Lynch letter, and I tuned on just now and found my sister reading The Making of a Slave. Yep, because we in alignment and we already know. We know. But it never hurts to continue to be educated and to hear it again and keep it reminded so that we can share with our brothers and sisters who do not know, or to avoid them and continue to grow amongst ourselves. Okay? So, Richard Hildreth, he wrote, while living on the slave plantation, The Slave, or Memoirs of a Fugitive. And the other book is called Despotism in America, an analysis of the deleterious effects. I don't know what that word means. Deleterious effects of slavery on the economic and political development of the southern states. Hold on real quick, y'all. I'm having my memory is being jogged. There's some things that I need to do later today, and one of them is get the files off my iPad, because that's why I be on my phone, because my iPad, I think, is full and it shuts off when I record these lives, and so I can't look up words on my phone when I'm recording on my phone, and I have got to find my dictionary, so I need to write those 2 things down. Where the heck is that notepad? I put it here yesterday for a reason. Let me just use an index card. Okay, so I need to get files off iPad. Find dictionary. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. So, The Slave is considered to be the first American novel to present an anti-slavery argument. The storyline in the book shows how slavery corrupted the morals of both master and slave. Hildreth portrays the slaves as complex human beings who do their very best to survive a very difficult situation. The hero in the book is a slave named Archie. Archie has a feeling of superiority over other slaves because of his white blood. When Archie begins to admire a dark-skinned slave leader, he realizes the extent to which he has accepted racism on the plantation. Hildreth shows clearly how everything of value to the slave, such as his wife, his child, his blood, his work, and his life, are not the slaves. Hildreth returned to Massachusetts and continued to write until his death. His writings were always along the idea of political reform. Hostility was provoked by his harsh criticism of the church for preaching morality without working to relieve human suffering. Hildreth did not relish church attendance and saw the church as lacking political reform, especially in the matter of slavery. He worked for the anti-slavery cause with George Bradburn, Maria Chapman, and John Pierpont. Theodore Parker and I need to look them up. Hildreth worked for anti-slavery cause. I've never heard of these people. With George Bradburn, Maria Chapman, and John Pierpont. Theodore Parker and Hildreth worked on legal challenges for the fugitive slave law. He was one of the first American historians to present the past exactly as it was, rather than edifying story with a patriotic moral. Despotism in America, or an inquiry into the nature and results of the slaveholding system in the United States, refers to slavery as a great social experiment. In this text, the author describes certain techniques for enforcing the empire of the master. It is said that to sustain an empire such as slavery, the most vigorous means are essential. The master would employ one of three means of control or a combination to keep the system operating. Which one he chose depended upon the tempers, talents, habits, and notions of the master. The three mechanisms of control are outlined as follows. Number one, force. Those masters whose tempers are harsh, violent, and brutal, especially those who have never been softened by education, rely principally upon force. Is the slave late in coming to the field? 20 lashes. Is he idle? 30 lashes. Is he guilty of the slightest act of insubordination? 100 lashes. Should he dare to offer any resistance, let him be shot, stabbed, beat to the ground with a club. Such is a brief specimen of this system of plantation management, which some call cruel, but which those who follow it merely describe as vigorous and efficient. Number two, fear. There are many men who cannot look without some feelings of sympathetic pain, or at least of instinctive disgust, upon the body of an old man or woman, perhaps, cut up with the lash and scored with bloody gashes. The screams and outcries of the victims affect them. They endeavor to avoid the use of the whip and to govern as far as possible by the fear of it. They strive to supply by bitter and alarming words the place of action, but the words soon lose their efficacy. And the master who governs upon the wordy plan soon comes to keep both himself and his slaves in a constant state of irritation and ill feeling by a process of fault finding, scolding, and threats, which becomes a habit and goes on from one year's end to another. 3. Fraud. There are some masters who pride themselves upon their cunning and superior knowledge of human nature, who make considerable use of fraud in the management of their slaves. One of the most usual applications of it is the attempt to take advantage of the religious feelings of the slaves and to impress them with the idea that obedience, honesty toward their masters, humble submission, and other like plantation virtues are religious duties which God commands under the penalty of damnation. This stratagem is chiefly practiced by slaveholding clergymen and church members. The religious people of the South have been at the pains of preparing a slave catechism. In some places they have established slave Sunday schools, and meetings for slave worship are regularly held. Some slave masters look upon religion among slaves merely as a means of plantation discipline, and please themselves with the idea that the more religious their slaves are, the easier they may be managed. The story of the horse Black Beauty provides insight into the manufacturing of slaves in America. There are several similarities between the tale and the reality of African Americans today, as well as during slavery. As discussed earlier, training techniques applied to enslaved Africans in America resembled those used in horse training. Relationships between mother and child in Africa were studied by slave masters in order to control them in slavery in America. The role of the father was also studied so that Europeans could counteract those roles and relationships. Corruption of the mind of the mother and the reduction of the father's role led to Europeans being able to control Africans for many generations. The African child, as did the colt, looked up to the slave master as leader as opposed to his own father, since the African male, like the stallion, was removed from his role as leader and protector of the family. Force, fear, and fraud, the three means of control discussed by Richard Hildreth and the methods discussed in the undocumented Willie Lynch speech, combined with the horse training methods, created an effective slavocracy whose impact is still being felt today. So that's the end of Chapter 3 of Recapturing the African Mind. The next chapter is called The Humanitarian Movement, and I'm going to end it here for today and pick up with you all on another day. I was trying to say time and day at the same time. On another day, at another time. Y'all be blessed, be peace, be love, be light. Drink your waters. Let somebody know you love them. Tune in and just be great. All right, peace.